Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Brad from World Expeditions, and we've got a wonderful topic tonight and a very special guest, our CEO, Sue Badyari, who had the good fortune of visiting Bhutan last year with one of our favourite photographers. So the photography should be very inspiring as well. But she'll be talking about the Bhutan Druk Path Trek, and she will be answering questions at the end. There is a Q&A that you can click on and type your question into and have that ready for her at the end. Yeah, thanks, Sue. Over to you.
Great. Thanks, Brad. We are really grateful that you've joined us today. So whether that be live or you're viewing this at a later date to watch the webinar, I just want to warmly welcome you. As Brad said, my name is Sue, and I'm really excited to be presenting this Druk Path webinar, which I'll hope to plan to wrap up nicely within about 30 minutes. And as Brad mentioned, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So just a little bit about me. Like, I've always really enjoyed the incredible opportunities for mountain trekking, during my travels in my career over many, many years. And the Himalaya especially is a place that I've spent a lot of time and that I feel really very passionate about. So, for me, it's not only the lure of big mountains, it's also, the delicacies of the flora and the fauna, as well as, of course, the people. The people are everything. The food and the traditions and lifestyle, they also hold much appeal. So, as mentioned by Brad, also, I did travel to Bhutan 30 years ago, showing my age here. And I hadn't been back until last September when I was lucky enough to reconnect with the country. And to be really honest, I approached that experience expecting huge changes in the country. But what I'm very pleased to say is that Bhutan has in many respects sort of stood still in time. And while it's advanced in areas such as, and these are important areas, technology and education and healthcare for its people, it was really unexpected that it's, been able to really kind of lean strongly into its cultural heritage. But even more that it's about its cultural preservation, as well as also maintaining a really, much aspired to carbon negative level, with over 70% of its land covered in forest still to this day. So I can say with absolute confidence that Bhutan is an absolutely charming country to visit. So in this webinar today, we're going to be sort of covering off a range of topics as I've listed here on the slide. And as mentioned, at the end, there'll be plenty of time to ask questions, or you can add them to the chat as we're moving through the webinar, and we'll get them answered for you at the conclusion. Okay, so I wanted to start off with a little bit of a geography of the country. So you can see here Bhutan is sort of a small country, but it is wedged between the superpowers of China and India. It's nestled in the eastern Himalaya, and it is a small nation, with the Himalaya mountains forming sort of natural walls around particularly the northern and western areas of the country. And those have really sort of long shaped its isolation, if you like, and also its security. So in fact, it's one of the most sort of unique political systems in the world history, because it's been able to sort of avoid colonization over many, many centuries, despite offensives from the Tibetans and the Mongols who are up to the north. And later the British came and also tried to invade the country. But because of its sort of mountain geography and its, countless fortress monasteries, and also a very sort of clever military who understood its geographical strengths, it was able to resist all of those invasions. Today, Bhutan, modern day, has a population of around 800,000 people, and they mostly live in the central parts of the country, where the land, is sort of low, and it's well suited to sort of farming and townships. But the country's culture is so deeply tied to the Buddhism of Tibet. It's also mountain life and a strong emphasis sort of on preserving traditional dress, also the architecture and also the customs. So it's often referred to as the land of happiness, instead of focusing just on economic growth. And, this idea was sort of introduced in, I think, about 1970 by the King, and he was keen to prioritize well-being and mental health, but also cultural preservation and environmental protection. So, if you like, in Bhutan, happiness is in fact a guiding principle for how the national people and their culture develops, and it makes decisions on that basis. So when you are in country in Bhutan, that sense of happiness is evident with the people moving through life at a really sort of gentle pace. They're always smiling. They bow slightly, always in greeting, and they really do show a very deep respect for their traditions. And I have to say also, my observation was that there was a genuine and very deep reverence for the king and queen, who are not just seen really as the rulers of Bhutan, but also as the moral guides and the symbols for the unity that the country does enjoy to this day. I just wanted to go over now to the best time to visit Bhutan, which is really important if you are considering a journey there. The best time, particularly for trekking, and that really will guide, when you should go, because you do not want to travel in the seasons where it's too wet, and you do not and cannot go to high altitude in the middle of winter because it's just too isolated and obsolete. So the best time to visit Bhutan really is in the spring and the autumn, and that's when the skies are the clearest, the mountains are visible, and the festivals are also in sort of full spring. So just to break that down, spring is the period from March to May, and that's when the rhododendrons are blooming, like you can see here in the right. And the valleys are really alive with colour. It's a great, great time to trek in and hike in the mountains there. The next season beyond that is sort of June, July, August, and that comes with heavy rains, lush landscapes, yes, but really tricky roads. And so we avoid the middle of the year because of that. Then we go into sort of the autumn time, September through to November, where you get crisp, sort of clear skies, and a lot of festivals taking place at that time of year. It is an ideal time to go trekking. And then it's winter, so it's especially cold in the north. The low valleys are mild, but and so they're okay for touring. But if you are contemplating a trek, we don't go there because the snow-capped peaks are just too isolated. Okay, so getting to Bhutan, the international flights are to Paro International Airport. It is not the capital. Thimphu is the capital, but Paro happens to be Bhutan's main gateway. But there are limited flights with just two carriers into the country, being Druk and Bhutan Airlines, with no other foreign airlines currently flying directly into the country. And so most travelers sort of coming from Australia, Europe, North America, and elsewhere will connect through one of the following ports that you can see there on the slide, which is through Delhi, Bangkok, through Kathmandu, Singapore, before flying into Paro. Archery is Bhutan's national sport, and it's a vibrant part of its culture. We were really on our second day in country late last year to watch one of these fantastic and lively events. It's also a very social event, and it's so much fun to witness because the teams get together. They're shooting long bamboo arrows at distances and targets, but they're also singing and they're teasing and they're sort of chanting to distract their opponents, if you like. So beyond the competition, archery really does reflect a sort of community spirit in this country. It's a tradition and it's a celebration. It brings people together of all ages, and it's a very joyful thing to witness. World Expeditions has a very long history with trekking and cultural tours in Bhutan, and we really do have the most fantastic operating partner. They go the extra mile and they really do deliver on a quality experience. And the trip that I'm presenting today is the World Expeditions Druk Path Trek, which is an 11-day guided journey that sort of combines the classic sightseeing, cultural sightseeing, with a 6-day trek along the ancient Druk Path. So This was fun. So the minute that you arrive, and this was not there 30 years ago, but it is now. But when you arrive at the airport, you will see beauty all around you. This is in fact the conveyor belt at the international airport in Paro, all beautifully decorated for arriving guests. And there's all these beautiful frescoes and color and cultural richness all around. And it only really does get better and better as you travel through the country. So the hotels that we're using during this tour are sort of four-star hotel properties. They've been really um, hand selected for their comfort and their style, and of course their Bhutanese character. And each sort of offers really sort of spacious rooms and a really warm hospitality. And typically, you know, they're built in a way that you do, and it takes advantage of some sort of very nice, serene views of valleys or mountains. So it really is a lovely way to unwind before or after a trek or during a sightseeing component of the tour. During the trekking section along the Druk path, you will be camping nights. They're very immersive, they're very scenic, and you'll sleep under the stars in comfortable tents that are set up in forests or open meadows or alpines like this, next to often bubbling sort of rivers and sometimes glacial lakes. And it's just so beautiful to be surrounded by the stillness of the mountains. On our first sort of day in Bhutan, what we will aim to do is to explore the beautiful Paro Valley. And gosh, it is so scenic, this place. So our first stop is called the Tarzong. And just to let you know what a zong is, it's really an administrative, a religious and a military fortress. These were the things that protected Bhutan a long time ago. They're bulletproof. They've got extremely thick walls, but inside the labyrinths, it's just fascinating, and it's some incredible art to be enjoyed there. So these also have sort of historic watchtowers that once protected the valley. So they are strategically built up in high places. Today, though, this one you can see in the foreground, the big one is the Museum of Bhutan, and it showcases, sorry, the one up at the top, it showcases a impressive collection of sort of artifacts and tanka paintings and really ancient relics that will really give you a strong foundation for understanding Bhutan's unique identity. And it's a great introduction. And next we'll visit the Rinpo Zong, which is a long-serving centre for governance, as well as for residence for monks, which is pretty consistent with all the zongs throughout the country. So after we've explored the courtyards and the sacred halls, we'll take a short walk down to the cantilevered wooden bridge that spans the Pachu River. Okay, so the next day is very, very special. I think anyone visiting this country will rate this as probably a highlight. And this is a hike up to Taksang Monastery. It's a really well-graded trail that they've built. It was much less steep than when I remembered when I was there 30 years ago. But the monastery itself is perched 600 meters above the Paro Valley, and following the trails through sort of pine and rhododendron forest with stops at a tea house en route and a few chortens, you will come close up to seeing this magnificent site, which basically is clinging to the sheer granite cliff. And after crossing a sort of prayer flag gorge and climbing down 700 steps and up the other side, you'll reach the monastery, and you'll be able to go inside, experience its inner temples that are all made of rock and timber, and that are beautifully integrated into the rock face. The following day, the trek starts. And so for the next 5 days, we step into the Druk path, which is an ancient high altitude trail that really historically linked the Paro and the Thimphu valleys, where traders and monks and sort of local communities used it for centuries, in fact, to carry goods and messages and sort of religious pilgrimages. So over time, it's become a route for cultural exchange, but it also now serves obviously as a great way for travellers just to get a bit of taste of that historic path. And it's a really great window into Bhutan's traditional way of life and its pristine landscapes. Okay, so the first night, oh, this place was magical. So it's at a place called Jale. It really is about a 4 hour walk above the Paro Valley. But upon arrival, you're just confronted with this lovely Zong monastery with practicing monks in it, and it's obviously a highly revered place because there are millions of prayer flags, literally. So a great place just to explore the surrounds and enjoy the thousands of fluttering flags everywhere that are believed to basically carry blessings around the land and to spread peace. I think it's thought compassion and also sort of good fortune. So yeah, it's about 3,500, I think, and 500 meters in elevation. But because you've had a little time in Bhutan already leading up to the first day's trek and the walk up to Taksang the previous day, it's sort of primed us nicely for acclimatization. And what you'll do on these trek days is you just carry a day pack. So your main luggage will be sort of carried by ponies, as is the rest of the food and equipment on the trip. The camp's set up there by your local crew, who are always just so attentive and willing to please. And it's incredibly comfortable, these camps, and you can expect some really impressive meals. And I will talk a bit about that later, but also some very exciting banter throughout the trek. There's always great storytelling, and I really enjoyed our meal times on the trail. Back on the trail, though, the next day you'll enjoy the Paro Valley, above the Paro Valley, sorry, into slightly higher elevations. And what we walk through now is more conifer, still rhododendron forest, but there's lots of orchids and wildflowers along the way. We'll also pass by lots of sort of traditional herder settlements, and one such, character that we met on the trail, you can see in the top right-hand corner there. He pulled out this out of his, very weathered leather satchel, a specimen, which is known as Yatsugunba. And that's a summer grass winter worm. It's not actually a worm, but it is a very rare parasitic fungus that grows out of a caterpillar underground. And these are highly, highly prized in various parts of the Himalaya, not least of all Bhutan, because it's a traditional medicine. It sells for tens of thousands of dollars per kilo, and it does make it one of the Himalaya's most valuable national treasures. So that was really interesting to see that. Our day ends at a place called Jangachukala, a hilltop wilderness camp where you have some outstanding views across the valley, and we settle in for the evening there. Okay, so the next day, the trek ascends slowly through, again, conifer forest and rhododendron patches, but we're crossing over a pass here, which is 4,190 meters. So even in the space of a relatively short trek, we do go to relatively high altitude. I never ever felt the effects of altitude, nor any of the team that we had with us. And it's, as I said, it's a really nice slow progress, and it's a very ambulating kind of walk that you do. It's not extremely steep. It does have steep sections, no doubt about that. But all along the way, it's incredibly inspiring because you've got beautiful Himalayan views. And on this day, we'll see two of the most famous peaks in Bhutan, which are Jomolhari and another called Jichu Drake. And both of those are major peaks. And it's typical, though, for the following 3 days that the walking hours will now step up a little bit to around 6 to 7 hours a day. But we're going to take it really slow, and we're going to have a nice long lunch break. And there's other regular stops along the way as well. So you just amble and you can see beautiful birds in this area, particularly with all this forest. You've got the Himalayan monal, which is also known as the Daphne, and this one you can see down in the middle there is in fact the male monal, and there's good chances that you do see them along the trail, together with other birds such as finches and pheasants, occasionally eagles up in the sky, and there's another one which is really nice to see, which is the noisy laughing thrush. Okay, so we're now in the middle of the Druk path trek. We're descending, you can see in the very right-hand corner there, the corner of a lake. That is actually a big expanse of water, which is called the Jimmy Lake, and that's at 3,830 meters. It's a very, sort of serene alpine lake that is said to house a spiritual ox. So we set up our camp in a really beautiful location, right lakeside, and you're just surrounded by sort of jagged peaks. You can see also within the 5 days of this trek that there's been some very changeable weather, and thus it's very important that you do prepare with your clothing and equipment. So if you are walking the trek with us, then you'll be receiving some very detailed information about what you do need to pack, including the layering system, which is all important when you are in Himalayan regions. And you also may be lucky enough to see the Himalayan musk deer. You can see the small brown deer in there with its long canine tusks. And in males, they produce like sort of fangs, and they have a scent gland in their abdomen, which produces musk. So we all know how valuable in perfumery and traditional medicine that is. And also, just to point out, along the way, once upon a time, this remote mountain trail, there used to be trainee monks who would retreat to these isolated climbs. They were purpose-built meditation huts for them, and they'd spend up to 5 months in complete solitude and silence. So you see remnants of that along the trail. This is just one of many. Um, yeah. Okay, I really loved this next day. Again, through forest, but beautiful outward looking views. And you'll land at a place called Labana. The paths on this day are really crisscrossed with other trading routes, so it's really common to kind of stop and hear stories of the people who are moving their livestock or sort of gathering medicinal plants, or simply just visiting relatives across the valley. This is probably the easiest way for them to get there. And we reach a saddle on this day, which is at 4,180 meters, and then we descend to Labana, where pilgrims have sort of stacked stones to make these cairns in the middle of the lake. And that is an act that is believed to sort of bring really good fortune and safe journeys and protections to those that travel through the region. I did mention earlier I wanted to talk about the food, and I do, because the food on this trek and all of our treks in Bhutan is a real highlight of the experience. What our operators have done is quite ingenious, and I won't go into all the ins and outs because they are trade secrets, but they really do deliver a restaurant quality meal in the wilderness. You'll get things like lamb and chicken curries, fresh vegetarian dishes with rice and bread, plus, for breakfast, things like fruit and muesli, toast, always with eggs. And lunchtimes, there's a variety of really interesting and satisfying options. And that obviously ensures that you've always got energy and enjoyment on the trail. We always look forward to our meals after a trekking day, or during one for that moment. So we certainly found the food to be a real highlight of the journey, and that is always commented on by our returning clients. And one of the really neat little aspects of this is that you get your own little trek menu when you start the trip, and you can refer to that every day, which is quite fun. Okay, a 6 hour walking day the following day sees us descending towards Thimphu, but we're encountering some really special views again along the way. A heavy downpour followed by sunshine. We were reaching a place called Gomba, which is that monastery you can see there on, it's a 12th century monastery, and where you'll be able to meet the monks and hear a little of their lives in this remote area. We had so much fun with this little monk. He was very, very fun. And back at the roadhead where our vehicle awaits us right down at the base, it's a very steep descent to get back down, but it's very enlightening as well. There's lots of little spiritual and religious sites along the way that we'll encounter. And you can also, on occasion, on this road meet local people who are coming up to those sacred lakes that we've come down from. Um, we'll have a really beautiful lunch at the bottom with our crew and others who have come in to collect us with the vehicles. And on the way back down the hill towards Thimphu, we'll stop at a sanctuary where we'll visit Bhutan's national animal, which is a unique creature. It's a bit like a cross between a goat and an antelope. They are endangered. They're called Tarkan, but the sanctuary that we'll pass by is a conservation area, and it's just lovely to see them in the flesh. Okay, so next on, sorry. Next on, we are in Thimphu. Uh, what can I say about Thimphu? When I mentioned before that there hasn't been a great deal of development in the country, that I would say is probably the only area that I really did notice it, because Thimphu is the capital, and naturally is where the work is. So it has sprawled in the last 30 years. Yet there's still not a traffic light in the city, sorry. And you can see the police officer here guiding the traffic, as they've been doing for a long, long time. The buildings are still all traditional, and there's really a wonderful vibe as people are sort of coming to this vibrant centre to shop and to eat and meet up with friends. I really enjoyed time in Thimphu. There's also many sort of cultural legacies in the surrounds of this city, and we'll enjoy seeing them during our stay. We'll definitely make a beeline to the local market, which is a real insight into just the local goings on there. We'll also visit the National Textile Museum, which is home to elaborate and very old weavings. And also a must-see while we're here is the Tibetan-style memorial, Chorten, where you'll be able to see the local tradition of performing daily circumambulations, spinning prayer wheels, and sort of monks everywhere just muttering prayers. It's quite spiritual, and it's quite moving to see that firsthand. And then it's on to Punakha. Oh, Punakha is beautiful. It's sort of you go over a high pass and drop into what would have been back in time a very remote valley. So it's quite a drive over the pass, and it does lend itself to some fantastic Himalayan mountain viewing. But it's set in sort of a lush, fertile valley, and it's flanked by mountains. And so Punakha has impossibly green sort of terraces. It's got big rivers running through and suspension bridges everywhere. And this was once the ancient capital. So its buildings really do sort of reflect its historical importance. And we'll be back on foot for part of this day. We'll be walking through the terraced farms and meeting the local farmers and learning a lot about agriculture, which is really foundational to life in Bhutan. So after a riverside picnic, this is in fact the backdrop that you get from that picnic spot. It's incredible. We'll visit this Punakha Dzong, and it is a majestic fortress. It's at the sort of confluence of the Pho and the Mo Chu rivers, and we'll take in all that it has to offer inside. I don't really want to spoil it for you if you are going, but safe to say, as as a very, very important administrative assembly, just poking your head into all the little mazes within that Dzong and monastery is quite something. So you'll really, really enjoy the Punakha Dzong on this trip. Okay, so next on, we're going to head on to Thimphu and return to Paro. We are going to see the Dochala Pass, which we would have come over formally to get into Punakha, but we're also going to stop at a number of sites. But one I just did want to pick out, which I found to be a real highlight that we've added recently into the experience, is the National Institute for Zorag Chusum. It's a painting school, but it's basically been set up by a foreigner who funds it still to this date as a collective with the Bhutan government. And it's all about preserving the 13 traditional Bhutanese crafts, including things like tanka painting and wood carving and weaving. And, it's a practicing school. So to just sort of drop in there, and see what they're all up to. It's fantastic. Just such an eye opener. There's also going to be time on this day for sort of souvenir shopping, and then we'll head off to our hotel in Paro. Now, if we can, and it depends on the group size, one of the experiences that we have tried to weave into this itinerary, and as I mentioned, it is very dependent on group size. We may be able to do a traditional Bhutanese farmhouse stay. And we did that, and oh, it was fantastic. The guy who owns the place used to be an international a chef at an international hotel within Bhutan. So the standard of food, but just all the surrounds, and again, real storytelling and great insights into living day Bhutanese culture. All right. So look, while this itinerary in 11 days, it does seem to cover a lot, it never feels rushed. And it really does, however, allow you to truly kind of immerse in Bhutan, and that really unique way of life, which I hope I've been able to bring to life for you this evening. But that sort of balance also reflects the country's high value, low impact tourism model, which is what they follow. And what that does is it sort of prioritizes quality over quantity rather than attracting sort of large numbers of visitors. And so there's a daily sustainable tourism fee that, as a visitor, you will pay that supports the guided experience, accommodation, and local communities. But it's also about those funds will go to things like protecting the environment and preserving the cultural heritage. So all the building upkeep and what have you. So it's not inexpensive to travel to Bhutan, but when you understand that every dollar that you spend there is going towards those causes and keeping those cultural legacies alive, and keeping this country just so unique, I felt it's very, very worthwhile. And it does keep, of course, Bhutan's mountain forests and all of its traditions intact. Okay, so before wrapping up, I did want to mention three trips actually that are to Bhutan. Two of them are brand new for us. Um, so this first one is a peak called Ganga Funsum, and this is the highest unclimbed peak in the world. It's also the highest peak in Bhutan, and it's right smack bang in the middle of the northern part of the Bhutan Himalaya. It's extremely remote. And this found its way into the lineup after an enthusiastic chat that I had with our local guide, who incidentally holds the record for walking the Bhutan Snowman Trek the most of any other local guide in Nepal. I think he's done it 22 times. So he knows his stuff, and he had been sent up to scout this trip, and he was just so excited and eloquent about what the experience has to offer. And that just sort of wore off on me and others who were in our trek. So it's now here in the lineup, and we have one departure in October this year and another in October next year. So yeah, it's 15 days of wilderness. The mountain itself is 7,526 meters, so it's a giant. It's I haven't been there, of course, but the photos that he was showing us on his iPhone do definitely reveal a very, impressive mountain. But it's not only that. I think what came across with his delivery was that it's just, you get the rhododendron forests, you get the yak pastures, but you get, a real sort of nomadic lifestyle up there as well. So with your crew that are with you, you can really enjoy all the things along the way. But it also takes in some of the iconic things such as the Paro and the Taksang. But it's just a really nice, kind of challenging walk that we have. The other new trip that I'd like to announce is the Bhutan Black-necked Crane Festival, which is a 9-day cultural journey, and that's timed to coincide with the annual arrival of the endangered black-necked cranes that come as migratory birds, and they land in the Gangte Valley in the center of Bhutan. And this is where traditional celebrations of the culture, the conservation, and community take place against a backdrop of alpine wetlands. It's a fantastic itinerary, and I think seeing the spectacle of these birds in nature, but also all the celebrations that go on around that in the central part of Bhutan is, very, very exciting proposition. And the other one I wanted to really put on your radar tonight is the rugged 29-day snowman trek, which will be hosted this year by no other than the legendary Soren Cruz-Leddert, who has just done so much exploratory and mountaineering trek. He's also a real legend, fun guy to trek with. And what he'll do is lead you across with the local crew 11 passes that are over 4,500 meters. So if you're looking for something that goes into an area of Bhutan, which is called Lunana, it's one of the most isolated regions in the country. This is really a must for those that are sort of looking for a mountain challenge, and certainly some of the Himalayas' finest scenery and culture. All right. So with that, this now wraps up the webinar. I really do hope that you found it helpful. And I'd like to just open up now for any questions, which I'll be happy to answer.
Thanks, Sue. That was pretty comprehensive. Just remind everyone, you will have a panel there on your Zoom, and it should say Q&A. And if you have any questions, now's a good time to catch Sue. We were lucky to pin her down for tonight.
Thanks, Brad. Maybe you could just tell me what the questions are, and read them out for me, and I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for a couple to pop up. If we don't have any questions now, naturally you can always ask our team. There's a number of people that have been to Bhutan. There's also lots of blogs and videos on our website, on our brand new website. Here's the first question, Sue. Getting very excited for our Druk Path trek in 3 weeks' time.
Fantastic.
Do you recommend trekking poles?
Absolutely. I've always abstained from using trekking poles. In the last, 5 years or so, I have become an aficionado of them. I think they're fantastic. They're very good for slippery areas. They're very good for going down hills, particularly. They just give you that support. I would highly recommend them. If you don't use them every day, all day, you can put them in the back of your day pack. But just for those tricky areas, they're very, very helpful.
Okay.
And have a great time. It's really great. You've got something fantastic to look forward to.
That's Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. And are there any other little gear tips that you might? Here we've got a question. Booking Druk Air doesn't look straightforward. Do we do that, or do you assist?
We can assist with that for sure. It is pretty straightforward, but we will certainly help. The other thing with that is there's sort of protocols that we need to get in place before departure. It's just things like taking your the passport details, because that will need to be registered with the internal tourism department within Bhutan as an entry permit for you to get in. But the flights are not tricky. We're certainly here to be able to help with those by all means, or to guide you in that what is required.
How early should you book, Sue, to make sure you get those flights? Because I'd imagine they'd be under a bit of demand.
They're under a lot of demand because there are only 2 carriers, and also coupled with that is many of our trips do fill out quite quickly. So I think just from a pure practical point of view, and also making sure that you've got good time to sort of focus on training and getting all your gear in, 9 to 12 months in advance is always the sweet spot, I think.
Excellent. Well, I think that wraps up the questions for tonight, Sue. I think you must have been super comprehensive. I found it super comprehensive. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And we'll send a link out tomorrow. And of course, if you have any questions, you can check in with our expert team. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.